everyone, welcome back to Game Changers here on the LHSAA network. I'm your host, Spencer Verret. This week, we'll be taking a dive into the current LHSAA investigation by the state representatives at the state capitol. We'll talk with coaches and principals around the state to get a feel on what our coaches and principals feel about this investigation. Our first guest this week is Brent Indest, the head football coach at Lakeshore High School. And coach, you've coached not only at Lakeshore, but along pretty much the whole southern area of the state. I guess when we kind of talked beforehand about what's kind of going on, what was your first take on hearing that?
My first take is that the second politics gets involved into the LHSAA, we will die as an organization. That is my first and number one take. That that this is a principal-run organization. I'm not saying that the LHSAA is perfect. I was one of the guys that was hugely anti-split when it happened. I've coached on both sides. Brought a Karen Crow team to the Superdome in 11. Brought Catholic of New Iberia on the private school side. 3 times between 13 and I guess 18. But with that being said, like I said, it's not perfect, but we get by. I do think it's as perfect as it's going to get now. I've always said the huge hypocrisy of the split was you either accept kids outside of your zone or you don't. Okay. And when the public schools who were accepting kids outside of their zone were not being considered select, I just thought it was the biggest hypocrisy ever. Now that hasn't been totally fixed, but it's close to being fixed. And I do think we have, we don't have the 12 team brackets anymore. We don't have those things. So I do think the LHSA is a pretty good situation. And I'm probably getting into questions you'll ask later, but the biggest problem now is the second that little Johnny gets slapped because they did something illegally in their school, and they lawyer up, and we know the schools that have done it, and as long as that continues to happen, Again, it's easy for me to talk big and bad because I'm not a part of it. I wish Bonine and the LHSA would said, I'm not meeting with the legislature. I'm not meeting with you. Sorry, sue me. Go for it.
I think you bring it up there a little bit too, but that has been a sort of the topic of controversy over the last couple of years, is that when fines or bans are handed down from the LHSA, people go straight for a lawyer. And now you've obviously had a history. I know at Catholic High, one year you guys weren't able to make the playoffs because of a slight paperwork issue, but you guys took it and just kind of accepted it and said, "Hey, look, it's our fault. We're gonna own up to it." But what kind of do you see a change now in sort of that mindset of we're not going to take that?
Well, it's the entitlement. We could get into that. Just everybody. I had a principal at Crowley High School years ago. He told me something very profound. He said, everybody wants justice until it deals with them or their kid. Everybody always wants justice. And I remember when we had that situation, and it was a simple paperwork error that we made, but we played for 4 games and an eligible player. Now, although he was a punter, he punted 3 times in 4 games, and he averaged 22 yards a punt. But still, we were wrong. We played in an eligible player. And I was approached about, hey, we need to appeal this. We need to fight this. I said, no, it's plain and simple. Okay? We signed off on paperwork that was not correct. And even though there was no intent there, you have to always say the cheaters are the ones that make you make all of these rules. And everybody has to abide by them. The holdback rule, the things that were going on with all the holdback students and all these different things, and the dual residency rules and all of these rules, they were made because of people trying to circumvent the system. And you need to live by the rules. If we don't have rules, it's it's anarchy, man. You got to have rules.
And the one thing about the rules too that has always stood out to me and has stood out to in these 2 meetings is, the principals are the ones that make these rules. And a lot of the times it's like rules that are, like you said, kind of from experience. Hey, we found out that this team was doing this. It wasn't in our rule book, so we added it to our rule book, and now it's not allowed. And, it's a principals run organization, right? So a lot of these principals are the ones making the rules.
Well, and that's one thing that it really bothers me when I'm having a casual conversation. It could be with a family member. And when they say, oh, the LHSA did this, they think of two or three or maybe eight people that are making these decisions. And yes, there is an executive board, okay, that does make the call on a lot of things. But in general, for the most part, it is the body, it is the principals of the association that are making these calls. And again, do I agree with everything that they do? Not always, but plain and simple, it's what we got to do. It's not a perfect system, but is there a more imperfect system than politicians getting involved? That's where the comedy comes in. Okay, that when the second politicians get involved, when you got guys that all they're worried about is getting reelected. Okay, and and you know what's behind this is people with money that are talking to their legislators and saying, I can't believe they did this to my kid. Okay, and they actually held us accountable. It's okay to hold everybody else accountable, but don't you dare hold me and my kid accountable. All right, and so politicians getting involved is the worst thing that could happen in this situation.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your insight into it. Don't go anywhere. We've got some more coming up after this. We've got a lot of other guests to come and share their thoughts. Coach Brent Indest, we appreciate you for joining us.
For over 100 years, our families have gathered together to share with each other our challenges and hopes, to take this light we've been gifted and paint a brighter future for the next generation. The seeds we plant today are the bounty we harvest tomorrow. As farmers, we know that together we're stronger than we could ever be apart. We're the Louisiana Farm Bureau, and we're the voice of Louisiana agriculture.
So it's going to come down to this.
Can they do it?
Oh no, they missed it! Wait a minute! There's a flag on the play!
Protect what matters most to you and find out the many ways you can benefit. 100% free tuition and fees to all state colleges. Job training in over 150 different career fields, healthcare, pay, and much more. The Louisiana Army National Guard, part-time service with lifelong benefits. Find out more by visiting www.lang-recruiting.com.
The LHSAA Network TV app features a 24/7 live channel as well as on-demand content with all the high school sports you want, and it's totally free. The app is available for download on TV-connected devices, including Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. It's the only place where every day is game day. Download the LHSAA Network TV app today.
Welcome back to Game Changers here on the LHSAA Network. I'm your host, Spencer Verret, joined now by West Monroe Principal Dan Lane to talk a little bit more about the principal's perspective on the legislative investigation into the LHSAA. And Dan, you know, we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand, but the state reps have said a lot of really interesting stuff so far, including saying, hey, we're going to disband this principal-run organization and form an organization of our own. Kind of your thoughts on how you've heard stuff so far.
Well, I'm not receptive to that idea. I don't think that's a good move. I don't think that's in the best interest of my school or my community or our athletes. And I think most principals probably feel that too, that, you know, there's always concerns to improve the LSHA. Everyone doesn't get what they want all the time. West Monroe has had its fair share of rulings that we've had to accept and move forward and try to learn from. But I think turning over all the responsibility of running high school athletics to a legislative committee or body of the legislature is probably not a good idea. Political winds change and wants and wishes change. And I'm going to tell you, if they think the phone is going to ring less, if they're in charge of it, I challenge you, that's probably not a reality check. That's not going to bear out. We could unleash something that none of us want, including the legislators. And I very much respect the legislative role. They have a huge job that impacts all our lives, and I don't want to mean any disrespect to them. But principals represent their individual school communities in the thousands, and we often know exactly what is going on at the school level.
You kind of mentioned too that principals not only represent the school when they go to these executive committee meetings and conventions that they host, you know, to try to figure
Right.
out, hey, what new rules are we going to pass? What we might change about it this year. You're literally one of the people that votes for one of the largest schools in the state, and you're one of many voters. You know, how important is the principal's role in the LHSAA?
Well, I think it's indispensable. It's not a coach's organization. A lot of people think it is. It's a principal's organization. And of course, many principals have been coaches. I've not been a coach. I've been an athlete in the past. I think athletics, the arts, and academics all complement each other. Obviously, they're extracurricular things, but the principalship, our primary purpose is education. So what does extracurricular do? It amplifies our capacity to fulfill that mission. So I think that's why it's a principals organization, because we are an educational institution. And I don't mean this ugly, but we're not an extracurricular institution. The extracurricular is just that. It is there to fulfill our mission as an educational purpose. And I think we're getting distracted with some of the other things about championships. But every team, every school can't win a championship. Most don't. So does that make their experience non-worthy, non-valuable? I know I did not win a state championship as an athlete, but I will tell you those were character-building, life-altering experiences as a part of a team, and my coach's impact on me was immeasurable. So it's not all about winning and getting that ring or that trophy, because the vast majority of all our athletes don't get that. But I guarantee you it improves their education and their learning in the process.
They've brought up a lot of topics. The two largest ones have obviously been the split and ending it, or do we keep it going? And then, do we allow one-time transfers? They've kind of shared their thoughts on how they think it should be, but ultimately it's up to the principals, right? That's the people who make the decision.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be one person who says, "Hey, this is what what we're
Correct.
going to do, and we're going to stick to it." It should be all the principals, right?
Well, I agree. The voting principals is a terribly great democratic body. I mean, it is a personification of a democratic body among the principals, and the board itself is principals who serve in that capacity, which is unenviable as a principal. I mean, I've got 2,000 kids to manage and 515 athletes. It's just mind-boggling to do the job I have every day, but to be one of the board members, and they do it voluntarily, is just my hat's off to them. I admire them very much. They're very knowledgeable. But it needs to stay a principals organization, and it is voted on. We vote on these things, so it's being done democratically among the principals. One-time transfer, if somebody could convince me that that's a good thing, and I don't think it is, then the body can vote that. And we will go along at West Monroe High School with what the body votes on. So why are we going to wipe away one democratic body of principals to replace with a ever more complicated body of people who frankly have a much larger role of importance in the state of Louisiana to get things done to impact all our citizens, including education and athletes and non-athletes. But as far as one-time portal one-time move, I just don't think that's in the best interest of anybody, to be honest with you. And if you want to move you can do a legitimate move, a bona fide move. There are moves all the time for various reasons, and those protocols are already in place, very well established, and schools live within those boundaries if they're doing what they're supposed to.
Well, Dan, we appreciate you for joining us here on the Game Changers here on the LHSAA Network. Don't go anywhere. We've got more coming up for you after this.
At Auctioner, we know healing is a team sport. That's why we've partnered with world-renowned orthopedic surgeon Dr. James Andrews to create the Auctioner Andrews Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Institute. Whether you're a professional athlete or a weekend warrior, our team of specialists are dedicated to getting you back in the game. So whatever your reasons are for reaching your personal best, we've only got one: you. Auctioner Andrews Institute. Long live you.
The start of school means the start of new sports seasons, which unfortunately can mean injuries. Too often, sports injuries are treated with opioids, leading to addiction among our youth. And drug addictions can cause overdoses and deaths. If you're injured, ask your doctor for medicines and therapies that don't use opioids. And if you're struggling with opioid addiction, we can offer treatment. Opioid addiction is a losing game. You can help. Learn more at realhelpvr.com. That's realhelpvr.com.
For over 100 years, our families have gathered together to share with each other our challenges and hopes, to take this light we've been gifted and paint a brighter future for the next generation. The seeds we plant today are the bounty we harvest tomorrow. As farmers, we know that together we're stronger than we could ever be apart. We're the Louisiana Farm Bureau, and we're the voice of Louisiana agriculture.
If you want to break the rock, you need to make yourself indestructible. If you want to play between the hedges, you need to work out there, up there, down there, everywhere. If you want to reach the win bar, you need to lose sleep, lose count. You need to play every game like you got nothing to lose.
Welcome back to Game Changers here on the LHSAA Network. I'm your host, Spencer Verret, joined now by Ouachita Christian head coach Steven Fitzhugh. And coach, we're talking about the legislative investigation into the LHSAA. There's been a lot of stuff brought up, just kind of, one-time transfer rule, ending the split, forming their own association, kind of your take on hearing all that through the grapevine.
Well, just hearing a little bit here and there, LHSAA has been around a long time, and this is not the first time that I think legislation has tried to step in. But the thing that I think people need to realize and remember is that the LHSAA, it is not just made up of an office down in Baton Rouge. The LHSAA, it is all the member schools in the state, and so the principals, the athletic directors, the coaches, they all have a say-so in what goes on each year as new proposals are made. And, just for example, this past year, that proposal of a one-time transfer was proposed at the January meetings, and it was voted down by a lot of votes because schools realize we don't want to get into the same transfer portal situation, if you call it, as the colleges are. Because if there's a one-time transfer rule, a person could start off at school A as a freshman, and if he's not happy there, then he could transfer to school B that's in his same attendance zone and be eligible as a sophomore. But if things aren't going well there, they could move out of their zone and go to school C right there. And they legitimately could go to 3 different high schools during a 4-year career. And so that was something that, again, the athletic directors, coaches, principals all felt like, a one-time transfer rule would probably open up a can of worms and make things a little crazy, kind of like they are in college sports right now.
You kind of went into it a little bit with the one-time transfer rule, but there's been a multitude of topics that these state reps have brought up. Like we just talked about, the one-time transfer rule and then the split. They've dove into the finances of what teams get in the Superdome. Are you not giving your schools that make it there enough money? It just seems like they're really trying to take a deep dive into what the LHSA does, and I feel like the LHSA runs well enough on its own that they don't need to get involved.
I agree that LHSA, I think, has been very transparent. I think Mr. Eddie Bonheim's probably been there for at least 10 years. I think he came right after the split initially started, and I think he's provided great leadership. That he's been open and transparent, said, "Hey, here's what is going on," and again, as schools, one thing I think is very open, and especially in these days, we as coaches, principals, athletic directors, we get regular emails of things that are going on, items that are coming up, communication. You mentioned finance situation. Before every championship event, the schools are notified. For example, in football, we have a meeting on Saturday before the Superdome ever takes place, and we're informed of here is the finance situation and what it costs, for the dome. That here's going to be your payout for each of the schools. That you're going to be responsible for this ticket sales situation, and again, just there's a whole lot that goes on for the championship events, and there's so many championships. In so many sports, it's not just talk about the split. That with that for football, there's 16 competitors as opposed to 10, and it's like that with every sport. And then again, growing in the different sports, from sports that may not be as front page as much, but there's bowling and swimming and everything else that it provides athletes a lot of opportunities. And again, not just the major sports, there's a lot of other sports that again may not always be in the forefront, but it provides opportunities for the kids. And LHSA puts on great championship events in all situations. And so again, I think people sometimes have a perspective and an idea, but at the same time, I also am the head track coach, and just running off a high school meet, it takes a ton of people. And so, running off a championship event for multiple days and many ball games, and having all the volunteers that can make things run smoothly, it takes a lot. And again, I don't think people realize that situation until they actually take on that task.
Well, Coach, we thank you for joining us here on Game Changers on the LHSA Network. Don't go anywhere. We've got one more segment coming for you after this break.
Protect what matters most to you and find out the many ways you can benefit. 100% free tuition and fees to all state colleges. Job training in over 150 different career fields, healthcare, pay, and much more. The Louisiana Army National Guard, part-time service with lifelong benefits. Find out more by visiting www.lang-recruiting.com.
At Breck Golf Courses, we focus on the highest level of play. That means award-winning courses, state-of-the-art practice facilities, unique shot-making opportunities, and tournament-level playing experiences. With 2 championship courses located in the parish, Beaver Creek and Santa Maria courses make the perfect setting to test your golf skills. Find your next hole-in-one with Breck Golf.
So it's going to come down to this. Can they do it?
Oh no, they missed it! Wait a minute! There's a flag on the play!
When looking for a college, I wanted somewhere that would push me and allow me to kind of be the person I'd always wanted to be.
Everyone here kind of has this mindset of seeing the next person succeed, and I think that just creates a Southern Miss spirit.
You find what you need out of Southern Miss. What I need isn't what another student needs, but we all find something here.
You don't have to be what people have said you've been. You don't have to be what people think you are. Like, coming to Southern Miss, you can totally reinvent yourself and be who you truly feel like you are meant to be.
Welcome back to Game Changers here on the LHSAA Network. I'm your host, Spencer Verret, joined now by LHSAA Hall of Famer and former principal Mike Boyer. And Mike, we're talking about the legislative session currently going on. They're investigating what the LHSAA does. They've brought up a multitude of topics, including one-time transfer rule, ending the split, going into finances. There's been a lot they've talked about. But kind of what you've heard and what your kind of reaction has been to this.
Well, this is it's really nothing new, as we said right before we came on the air. I mean, my time goes back to Frank Spruill, to Tommy Henry, to Kenny Henderson, to Eddie Bonine, and this is not the first time that the legislator or a legislator has stepped up and tried to gain control of the LHSAA or tried to get their way for one of their constituents.
You kind of mentioned it. They've been blunt about it. That, hey, look, we're going to try to find a way to make our own association, and we're going to see who supports us on it. And like you've said, this has happened before. Is there any kind of thoughts that you think they might be able to pass that sort of bill that would allow them to form their own thing and maybe try to take control, or is it just? It seems like it's just more talk from them.
Well, I mean, it's talk. But I think it's a minority talk. It's it always seems that a parent is disgruntled about a ruling that the LHSAA passed forth, following the rules of the LHSAA, and they call their local state representative, congressman, senator, to see if there could be some interference, and the reality is, there is interference, and that interference usually works with threats of takeover of the LHSAA. And, I'm not, and I'll go on record, I'm not a fan of the split, never was. I was I was involved in Catholic education for 48 years. So, I was on the other side at all times. But, for what I see, the LHSAA with Eddie Bonine has done a great job of mending some of the wounds that were out there. Obviously enlarged the select and non-select, and I think people are basically happy. So I say, if you think that you can go, build another organization that would top what the LHSAA can do for 420 schools, go for it. Because I don't think it'll happen. I mean, look at the NCAA. I mean, that is just such a smooth organization right now. Everybody's in an agreement that it's not a good place. I would say the majority of the principals in Louisiana, while they may not agree with everything, they think it is a fair and equitable organization that they're happy to belong to.
And, they've brought up, Bodine said, he's a fan of the one-time transfer rule. It would solve a lot of the problems that kind of have happened. I know people feel indifferently about some of this stuff, especially ending the split, but what people need to understand, too, is this has been brought in front of the committee. This has been brought in front of all the principals and said, hey, do we want to end the split? And they voted it down. Do we want to have a one-time transfer rule? And they voted it down. So, I sometimes wonder where that sort of, we need to get this done right now. Well, the principals don't want to get it done, right?
Well, it is a principals organization. And before something can be passed, it has to go on the docket. It's voted on in the annual meeting in January, and is voted on by principals. Athletic directors, coaches, superintendents. No, those are not the people that have the vote. It's the principals that have the vote, And while they have clearly voted that the split will remain, I don't think they, this last session, they did not vote for a lot of things that this legislative session or the individuals are bringing up, in a takeover. So, they're auditing the LHSA, they're checking the records of the LHSA, and it's very clear, at least in what you read in the press, that the LHSA is sound with what they do, and it is accepted by their membership for what they do.
Well, Mike, we appreciate you coming on to talk a little bit about it, and we appreciate everyone for watching this episode of Game Changers here on the LHSAA Network.